Considering AB's comments about Big Ben, who do you think's more central to this entire thing? Who's the core of the problem? Ben Roethlisberger or Antonio Brown?
Well, when I look at Antonio Brown, I'm certainly not about to absolve him from anything. But the reason why I put, and I'm going to go the route of Big Ben Roethlisberger, the reason why I put it on him is because of a couple of reasons. Number one, it's universally understood that wide receivers are arguably the biggest divas on any football team. I mean, they're wide receivers for crying out loud. They're out there running routes all the time, and they're lucky if they get 5 passes thrown to them per game, even though that's not the case with Antonio Brown. It's more like 8 or 9 when it comes to him. We understand that. But the reason also to hold Big Ben Roethlisberger accountable in all of this is that I think he's gotten a pass. He's been allowed to lay in the dark, having missed the playoffs. We haven't heard from him at the season immediately after the season ends. He goes on a local radio show in Pittsburgh for his weekly radio gig, okay? And basically lied, talked about how there was no issues really with him and Antonio Brown. Their relationship was fine. And I told y'all, it wasn't fine. It wasn't fine at all because I had spoken to Antonio Brown. Antonio Brown is not fine with Big Ben Roethlisberger. So it's nice to see him publicly declaring where he has stood privately for months now, if not years. Big Ben Roethlisberger is a future Hall of Fame. He's a 2-time champion. He's been to 3 Super Bowls. Got nothing but respect for him. But the reality is that we have to recognize the fact that Big Ben Roethlisberger has a history of throwing teammates under the bus. And when I say teammates, I'm not just talking about players. It's players like Antonio Brown, Martavis Bryant, James Washington, called out the youth, talking about how plays needed to be made. He's called out coaches in the past, including his offensive coordinators. One offensive coordinator, Todd Haley, is gone because of the relationship that he had with Big Ben Roethlisberger. He's called out management from time to time, and he doesn't seem to call out himself enough, which is why I add credence to what or absorb credence to what Antonio Brown said when he basically said Ben Roethlisberger is like an owner. You know, he comes across as somebody that could just sit up there and diminish and disrespect other people. I'm paraphrasing there, but that's essentially what he said. And so for me, if you are the quarterback, if you are a future Hall of Fame quarterback, if you're the face of the franchise, and you have been for more than a decade, and you have an elite receiver of this magnitude who is speaking that way against you, you cannot be absolved from it. No excuse for Antonio Brown's childishness. I get that. But I find myself looking at Big Ben Roethlisberger because if Big Ben Roethlisberger were a bigger man, then it would be easier to deal with the petulance of an Antonio Brown, the predictable petulance of an Antonio Brown, because that's what most wide receivers are.
I don't absolve Ben Roethlisberger. I'm on the exact opposite end of this as you. I don't absolve Roethlisberger, but this is about Antonio Brown. How many Super Bowls have the Pittsburgh Steelers won in their franchise history? 6. How many have they won without either Terry Bradshaw or Ben Roethlisberger? 0. You need a franchise quarterback. Whether or not it's fair, that guy has more sway in the organization than even the best receiver ever, because it's not as correlated with winning Super Bowls as having a franchise quarterback. So, Roethlisberger's throwing guys under the bus. He does a lot of stuff I don't like. However, the Pittsburgh Steelers, even with a Le'Veon Bell situation, were still the Steelers low these many years. Browns never won a Super Bowl with him, but they won a Super Bowl before he got there. They'll still have Super Bowl chances after he leaves. Antonio Brown shows up, and all of a sudden, Rooney, the owner, is in the press making noise about maybe Brown doesn't have to be back. Mike Tomlin's being questioned. The quarterback's being questioned. Brown looks bad, keeps talking about these guys. So a franchise that was like the model Northeastern, old school, run the ball, stop the run, win Super Bowls franchises, all of a sudden it's like, wow, the Steelers, and like everyone involved looks a mess. That wasn't the case before Antonio Brown started talking. I got to blame this and whoever else is culpable to what degree. To me, it's about Antonio Brown.
What do you think, Lewis?
Look, there's a whole lot of blame, and it's just not about – this isn't just a question of Antonio Brown versus Ben Roethlisberger. There's a lot of things that lead to the kind of combustible situation that you have here in Pittsburgh right now, and a lot of that starts at the very top because you are enabling and you are allowing this kind of situation to fester within your locker room and going unchecked. Look, Max, I agree with you. Look, quarterback play, yada, yada, yada. It's important as far as trying to win Super Bowls. We get it, okay? But so is credibility when it comes to your number one leaders, or rather your number one leader in your locker room. Credibility, trust. It's about that. And I'm not absolving Antonio Brown, don't get me wrong, because we've talked a lot about his childishness, and he has put it on display himself, and he does need to grow up. He does need to do some things that get out of himself and back into the team. He does need to do that. But there is a trust issue going on here, obviously, between him and Big Ben, and I think it's something that obviously the Rooneys right now understand that, maybe we need to take a step back here a little bit and really listen to Antonio's side of this and really kind of gather all the information here, because something's festering here with our football team that just keeps coming up over and over and over again. And look, there's enough rumors that are going around Pittsburgh as far as Mike not running a tight enough ship, and I'm sure he's going to have to be involved as far as this is concerned about, hey, what kind of changes do I need to make going forward? I'm a little bit to blame for this. Again, the Rooneys are a little bit to blame because although you can't manage teams from the suites and from the boardroom, you have to have your finger on the pulse of what is going on with your football team, especially concerning your primary players, your superstar players, the players that ultimately are going to get you to the Super Bowl. And right here, it doesn't look like they have their pulse on the finger of anything, because all of a sudden now, although there may have been rumors swirling around about maybe how Big Ben conducts himself as a leader, and there's been evidence that says that he's willing to throw anybody under the bus and not really step up and hold himself accountable like some of the other multiple-time Super Bowl champion winning quarterbacks do. Look, man, well, it's time. It's time for them to really have a clearing of the air here, because do you really want to send Antonio Brown packing? Do you really want to send him down the road?